Today, we welcome back Leif Cocks, founder of the International Elephant Project based in Sumatra. The International Elephant Project is a not-for-profit project for elephant conservation, rainforest protection, and local community partnerships in order to protect and save the entire ecosystem and biodiversity of habitats shared by elephants. The Sumatran elephant is critically endangered. The current population is estimated at 1,200 to 1,500. Threats to their survival is in part due to habitat loss, where Sumatra has experienced one of the highest rates of deforestation within the Asian elephant's habitat range, as well as human-elephant conflict, because as plantations and fields move into elephant habitat, elephant food sources and migration routes are compromised. As elephants looking for food raid crops, retaliation killing can occur. In this podcast, we'll learn how the International Elephant Project works to protect and conserve the Sumatran elephant and how we can help ensure a future for these elephants. Hello, Leif, and thank you for speaking to us today about the Sumatran elephant.
Oh, hi, Nicole. It's great to be here.
Thank you. Thank you. Let's start off by just letting listeners know when the International Elephant Project was created and why.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, I started off, for many years, way back in 1998, started off with orangutan conservation. And orangutans were always meant to be an umbrella species where all of the species and the human indigenous population can come along under that umbrella of conserving habitats. But it became fairly obvious that there was, some species slipping outside the umbrella, and specifically, in this case, the elephants. They were in small fragmented herds, and there was need for specific immediate action to save the elephant, to bring him under the umbrella of our holistic conservation efforts. And so we started working to save the elephants and stop humans and people killing each other in ecosystems working with. And sometime after, we actually then formalized and started the International Elephant Project to allow people to connect, and contribute to the ever-expanding work that we're doing to bring back the Sumatran elephant and more recently Borneans and Laotian elephants back from the brink of extinction.
Wow. It's really scary to hear you say that because I don't ever want to see that happen in my lifetime. But thankfully, there are people like you doing this work to help reduce human-elephant conflict and protect these endangered species. Can you paint a picture of the threats these elephants face on a daily basis, what life is like for them?
Mm-hmm. Elephants are a lowland species. So, let's say in Sumatra, the vast majority of protected habitat are in the hills or in the mountains, because that is convenient to protect for water catchment and, probably not the ideal place to plant your palm oil plantation. So all the elephants, are in degraded log forests outside a protected habitat in a human-dominated landscape. So the idea of just protecting national parks or protecting primary forest doesn't work at all for elephants. Equally so for animals such as orangutans and tigers, but elephants far more acutely. And so they're really just trying to survive in these human-dominated landscapes with ever-shrinking forests to protect them. And so, that's and they're in fragmented populations. There is no viable population of Sumatran elephants left. That train left the station, for decades, if not a century away. But what we could do is conserve these vital ecosystems where herds of 120, 150 Sumatran elephants can survive, and then work over the medium term to manage those populations, both by securing them and preventing the human-elephant conflict, but also transferring the males on a regular basis between the populations to keep them genetically healthy, and therefore manage them as one mega population that could actually survive the extinction crisis.
Wow. Okay. So is part of this picture of trying to help preserve their population, is there, because elephants love to migrate, or is there anything that can be done to help with connectivity of migration routes, or is that kind of out of the question based on plantation fields have taken over and all of these scenarios?
Yeah, no, very good question. When I first started in conservation, 30 years ago, that was actually possible. We can say, hey, what we need to do is conserve or restore corridors between these ecosystems that elephants can transfer. That is just not possible anymore. Over the last 20, 30 years, 80% of Sumatran rainforest just been pulp papered by, major big multinationals. And so we're really dealing with these scraps of fragmented ecosystems we're trying to piece together before it's too late, and they're far too isolated and separated. And so traditionally what happens is the males leave the matriarchal herd when they become mature, and they go through the rainforest, travel large distances to find an unrelated herd of females, for them to breed. Mm-hmm. And when these populations were connected, that system worked, for millennia. However, now what happens is they move into this human-dominated landscape, and then they're either killed as agricultural pests or from fear, or they're poached by illegal poachers who are seeking the ivory from their tusks. And so in a lot of ecosystems, when we start working there is no male elephants left. There's only the females left. All the males have been killed. Right. And so one of the things we've been doing is transferring these males, which become conflict elephants, coming out of these patches of rainforest where the females are living, and actually literally putting them on trucks and driving these to the ecosystem so they're safe, but also they become the new breeding bull, which allows for the next herd to survive.
Okay. Wow. That's a lot of work on your part, and keeping up and tracking them and transferring the male.
Unfortunately, that is the only way we're going to save the species. Benign conservation, like conserving a large area and just allowing them to be elephants in their own societies, is just going to do them to extinction because it's too small for them to. Ecosystems are just too small now to do that. And so, the burden and the cost is borne on us for decades, if not a century ahead, until we have a more enlightened planet that starts rewilding and connecting these ecosystems. So the big multinationals, by and large, they make a huge amount of profit by exploiting the environment and destroying, and replacing with unsustainable monocultures such as palm oil and pulp paper. And the true cost is borne by the indigenous communities who lose their land, elephants who lose their chance of survival. And of course, conservation organizations like us, which are born with the cost of long-term costly management of these beautiful creatures to ensure that they don't slip into extinction.
Right. It's a lot to, I mean, for myself, it's overwhelming to hear that and to know that there's high stakes for the indigenous people, for these animals that have been here for millennia, and now we're looking at just a handful of them, and the work that International Elephant Project is doing to protect this handful of these beautiful creatures. And that's where the next question comes in about the International Elephant Project created a monitoring and mitigation unit to work with the community. So how do they work with the community to help reduce human-elephant conflict?
Well, the first thing is we radio collar an elephant in each herd. And then every half hour from satellites, the location of the herd is there. So if they're away from communities, fine, they're there. But when they start coming close to the community, we can then move our elephant conservation team in closely to making sure that the elephants and people are safe. Local community leaders also get a mobile phone that they can call the team
Okay.
if they see a stray elephant and they're a bit frightened. So they don't have to take non-lethal lethal action. They can just call the team and they will come in and deal with that. And then we actually train and provide the community with non-lethal ways of protecting their crops, such as scare cannons, non-lethal electric fencing, and maybe planting certain trees which deter the elephants to a certain extent from coming close to their crops and villages. So working hand in hand with them to provide a way that both elephants and people can live in harmony. Because remember, both the indigenous community and the poor people and the elephants are suffering from the same problem. The big multinationals haven't recognized their land rights and forcing them into this ever-increasing area. So maybe 100 years ago, they'll probably occasionally see an elephant. Oh, there it goes, and maybe they talk about their grandfather once having an elephant come into and destroy their crops. Now
Right.
it's like, because everything is so compacted, and both species, humans and elephants, are trying to survive in two small areas. They're under increasing conflict. And so we both have to work with the communities for them to survive and prosper in this new environment, but also work with the elephants.
Right. You're actually working for both sets of lives at the same time.
Exactly. But both persons are important, and their prosperity and survival is important to us, both human and elephant.
Right. Correct. Because this is their land as well.
Mm-hmm.
How many monitoring units are there?
We fund several units all over Sumatra.
Okay.
So wherever, of course, money is a restricting element for us. So every time we manage to raise some more money, we can start a new unit, a new ecosystem. So that's an ever expanding project to protect more and more herds. But we have several units all over Sumatra now. And we're also
Okay.
working we're leading a consortium of great scientists and technicians at the moment to actually bring the technology into using artificial intelligence to be able to identify the location and the actual individual elephants from their subsonic calls that they communicate over kilometers with each other. So we're hoping in the future we won't have to radio call them anymore, because we can use their call sounds to locate them and who they are. But we can probably do it at a far more precise, granular level and actually identify individuals. And this will then obviously reduce our costs and increase our effectiveness on preserving these beautiful animals in their habitat.
Wow. Amazing what technology can do. It's a blessing and a curse.
Exactly. We're living in a time which I call the most important decade in human history. We can end up destroying the planet into feedback loops which will end in catastrophe for every living being on the planet. All this wonderful opportunity to stop and recover the environment and use some of the fascinating technology which has become more and more available to allow us to do this.
Yes. Yes. Right. Yeah, it's scary to think about that, we could have the flip side of complete catastrophe.
Yes, that is exactly. That's why I call it the most important decade in human history.
Yeah.
And so, so unfortunately, no time for rest in this
No,
decade.
no, your work's cut out for you. That's for sure. And I hope that through this podcast and that we can continue to raise awareness and get more people to help with this cause. Now, the elephants that are monitored in Sumatra, are they mostly in that, I'm sorry, I'm not going to pronunciate this correctly, Bukit Tigapulu ecosystem? Are they mostly located there, or are they also like in Loser National Park?
We have programs in the Lusa National Park and Waikambas, Teso Nilo, the Harapan Forest, and Buka as just some examples that have come to mind. And so, yes, we have on the ground activities that we're funding and supporting in all those different ecosystems, in order to preserve the ecosystem but preserve those herds there. And of course, what we've been doing, for example, in Buka we have actually transferred a bull named Harris from Buka put him on a truck and sent him to the Harapan Forest, where there was no females. There was only female elephants left. And then
Wow.
we are the funding and supporting the Harapan Forest Rangers in order to protect those herds into the future.
Right.
And so we're doing it across it. But Buka has been a place where we've been working with elephants for over 25 years, and we know them quite intimately.
Wow, that's really cool. I wanted to ask, and I meant to ask this earlier, with the monitoring work that International Elephant Project is doing, have you seen the locals respond better when they see an elephant? Because now it's much more common because everything is condensed and they're all sort of just living together. With this monitoring unit and having people being able to call and have all these things that are helpful, like planting the trees and the fences, you see that there is a little bit more that the locals are feeling, okay, I know how to handle the situation a little bit better now.
No, definitely. Because I mean, when we started, it felt like a bit like the Hatfields and McCoys in the Appalachian Mountains in the US, because they're persons, both are persons. And so,
right.
A person will kill an elephant and the elephant will have a revenge attack, and vice versa. And so you have these two persons competing against each other with limited resources, and then they feel in a certain situation their only recourse is to kill the other person, and then of course then there's retaliation, just like with all persons, and then
right.
it just spirals down into a mess, and of course ultimately humans will win, and the elephant will go extinct, but not without considerable costs. And so so now it's really a way of working with the indigenous communities for them to live in harmony, and we've certainly seen significant benefits, for both sides of this, in their prosperity.
Beautiful. That's beautiful. It makes my heart happy to hear that. At least there can be some kind of coexistence there, with the work that you've been doing. I was reading up about the elephants and the herds there, and I read a story about how two elephant herds had joined together. Mm-hmm. And so they were going into these high human activity areas. How did the monitoring unit work with helping to reduce this human elephant conflict with this double herd?
It's interesting because elephants have this wonderful social system, and I guess it's best described as a fission fusion groups, and so they split up in smaller groups and join together. But because remember I mentioned we're looking at developing a technology to track them through their subsonic calls. So from an elephant's point of view, we don't hear it because it's below the frequencies human can hear. They're still talking to each other. So it's not like for them, they still understand, they know where their herd is and they have some connection with through their calling. So from their point of view, they're still part of the one extended family. And so in the Buka ecosystem, as an example, with those two herds, they're all actually related, But obviously the two herds are more related to each other, but they're also related, connected to each other as well as all the females. And so coming together is a natural part of the fission-fusion relationship. And unfortunately, their land has been taken away. So they're used to, maybe I best describe that elephants, like humans, predominantly adapt to the environment through culture, not natural selection, predominantly. And so you have these matriarchs, which is the similar to how humans used to live. We have these matriarchal females that hold the culture and pass down from generation to generation knowledge, until we decided to burn them all as witches, of course. But that's another story. But we still have those matriarchal leaders, I guess, in the elephants, and they follow these paths that's been gone for centuries, making sure the herd goes from one place to another safely through the tried and true cultural understanding of the environment. But with the rapid destruction of the rainforest, that has all changed. And so they have to, first of all, they often just try to go through the destroyed environment because they don't know what else to do, because culture can't change very quickly. As we're seeing how even human indigenous communities find themselves dysfunctional when the environment changes rapidly, because it's very hard for that culture to adapt extremely quickly. And elephants have the same situation. They end up taking the herds through these large disturbed habitat, going, well, we've been moving this way for centuries, and we should keep doing that. And then, of course, it reaches a point where, they're forced to change and try to readapt and to the new environment. And so they're going through, in a sense, this cultural upheaval and trying to understand, I guess, how this new environment can work for them. And so, so they come, so sometimes they come together in large herds, as they always done over the centuries. And then, of course, that just makes it, for us, a key time to send as many of the elephant conservation team out there to ensure both elephants and humans are safe.
Yeah. And I love the point that I never thought of it in this perspective about just having to adapt to this new culture, how fast they have to adapt to everything, because everything's so rapidly changing.
Exactly. Humans can't adapt this fast either, so it's just as difficult for elephants. And so it's a long-term process. It's a long-term, I guess, project, if that makes sense. Both with the human population, because, for example, the indigenous population, the hunters and gatherers and the /remote agricultural farmers, their way of life has been environmentally sound for over centuries. But because the vast majority of the land's been taken away, the hunters and gatherers will hunt out all the animals until they starve, and the /remote agriculture people will destroy the rainforest because they don't have time to regenerate. And so we're working with them to move them sympathetically to new agricultural systems and new economic systems which will be sustainable. And of course, you can imagine from a cultural point of view, that is hard.
I can't imagine.
And it's difficult. And I guess what I'm reflecting to you is it's just as difficult for the elephants. And so we're seeing, both elephants and people under cultural stress, trying to adapt to this rapidly changed environment. And of course, our goal is obviously to secure the destruction, but wherever possible, regain rainforests to allow these ecosystems to be environmentally sustainable. And of course, in conjunction with that, allow these ecosystems occupied by the indigenous community to be economically sustainable, so that people can actually prosper and become affluent in a way which is environmentally friendly.
Right. Have you been able to see any kind of improvement with creating more rainforest to maintain some of the biodiversity and that's there to help the indigenous people and the wildlife?
At this stage, we have we're basically trying to stop the destruction. That's the major thing. And so what we've been doing all over Indonesia is leasing large tracts of rainforest, 100,000 hectares here, 100,000 here, 50,000 hectares here, of lowland river rainforest, which is a key forest for elephants and the other biodiversity to survive. The highlands is not that important. And of course, it has indigenous communities in it. And then it may involve habitat protection, obviously. Some of that will be reforestation, regaining some of that land. And the other part I mentioned, starting new economic systems with indigenous communities to allow the rainforest and people to survive and prosper. So it's each ecosystem's in work in progress. Major, for example, in Bukit Tigapulu, the Thai company Michelin has basically destroyed the lowland which connects two of the areas that we lease. We lease some lowland areas in the south of the ecosystem, and they were connected by a corridor, and Michelin subsidiary destroyed it all, and then drove out the elephants from their rubber plantation. This is a French company that actually was selling these as green bonds. This is an environmentally friendly activity, taking indigenous communities' land and basically cutting off the elephants from moving in their way. So we're hoping that that they claim to be green, but it just seems greenwashing.
Right.
We hope to actually move them to actually really give back that land. Of course, it's all trash. They destroyed it all.
Oh, wow.
But at least if we get it back, the elephants can move through unhindered. And then we can start a reforestation project to reclaim it for conservation.
So are you saying that even though you had this land leased, they were still able to go in there and
the lease, they're not out in the areas we lease, but
okay.
In this particular situation, the national park, as I may have mentioned before, is created in the hills because of water catchment, and it's not really good for agriculture. So that's a national park we should protect it.
Okay.
So what we did is we leased 38,000 hectares of land, the lowland area south of the national park, in 2 blocks that were available to us.
Okay.
And Michelin got the area between them in the lowland area connected. And elephants can't go into the hills; they can't go in national park. So to get from one area, they have to go through the Michelin concession. And they supposedly had this green rubber. They knocked down the whole forest and put this monoculture rubber, and claimed that they were looking after the wildlife, but they actually just destroyed everything. And
that's a shame.
So it's just an example is it's big multinationals, which is not, because often people get this impression from conservation that these poor people are out there ignorantly destroying the environment. That's not the case. It's large multinationals destroying the environment and passing on the true cost of their products onto the powerless, the elephants, indigenous communities, and future generations through their effect on climate change. And so, but again, we hope that the pressure on these companies will increase from consumers. That will force them to become real green, not fake green.
And not greenwashing.
Ask them to re-establish this elephant corridor, which is so vital for the elephants of Bukit Tigapulu.
That's wonderful. So is there any kind of legislative work that can be done for that to happen, or how would that work to get them to restore that area?
I think the only possibility at this stage is pressure from customers, and purchases of their product. It's true all over the world. Big multinationals with money, they can write their own laws. They can write their own rules.
Well, and that happens around the world, right? I mean,
So it's really if as we as a community, hold through our elected officials and through our own individual collective actions, hold them accountable, and let them know that, they need to really step up and be the real thing.
Right. Because like you said, they have so much money and they're able to cause so much damage because they are so big. In one fell swoop, things can be gone and forever changed. And like you said, it's hard for Indigenous people and the wildlife to adapt so quickly to changes like that. And then our earth takes a toll as well. And then we take a toll.
Exactly. And so one of my key messages I always, when I'm talking, is, 200 years ago, we could have exploited these poor people in these colonies and extracted all the wealth from their nations and kept them impoverished and destroyed the environment. Hey, there's no comeback on us. We just get rich. We don't even have to have these people in our mind or vision. They're just the externalities of us just doing business. But the chickens are coming back to roost. We can't leave any living being behind now. We're destroying our planet unless we have a way of living and restoring this planet where all living beings can live and prosper. We're all going to go down. And so, so even from a selfish perspective, if Western countries want a long-term sustainable economy, that produces wealth and affluence for their people, they also need to be concerned, and stop the exploitation of the powerless in developing nations, and especially in the tropical belt of our planet, which disproportionately does so much to help mitigate climate change.
Right. It's the lungs for our planet. Just a little side story. As you were speaking about this, a friend of mine told me a story about her son came home from school and he was in his science class and he said, "Mom, guess what? So many animals are going to go extinct soon." And he goes, "And you know what the biggest thing is?" And she said, "What?" And he said, "That means we're going to go extinct after them." And he was so forlorn. He was so sad. He was so upset to hear that news, as a young boy with so much life ahead of him, to hear that in his education.
Yeah, it's kind of, we are the most affluent generation that will ever live on this planet. At least from what we can understand, because we eat it into the future capacity of our planet to support the environment, and therefore the economy, and therefore the people. And so we have a really huge responsibility in the next decade to. We're not going to hand over a better planet to our children and grandchildren. That train has also left the station.
Yeah.
But what we could do is hand over a recoverable planet and the knowledge and the understanding of how to recover that planet, so that future generations can recover and live in prosperity into the future.
Yeah, I like that. That there could be a chance for us to recover.
I think there is, if we act intelligently and decisively in this next decade.
Right now.
Correct. That's right. That's right. Because one of the things is often, but the future generations are key. We've got to educate the future generations, and that's all great. But it's going to be too late for if we just leave it to them. We have to do that, of course. But we, as our generation, as the most affluent, so we have the most resources, and as well as the obligation to us to make decisive actions, and then obviously be the role models for future generations on how we can recover these ecosystems and planet.
Yes. Thank you for sharing that, Leif. I appreciate that. Can you just let people know about the adoption program for the elephants?
Yeah, I mean, what we find, for most people, what's really engaging for them and the connection is to engage to a particular elephant, and then go along on that journey with the elephant, with our 6 monthly adoption updates. And so, of course, but those elephants just are, I guess, representatives of the whole herd or the whole species, which we're working to try to save. And so we have 4 elephants at any time up for adoption, where people can adopt them and get their 6 monthly updates and follow their stories. And that's a really great way of people connecting, if that makes sense. I mean, a lot of people, some people want to, as we've been discussing a lot, the big picture and the strategy of what we're trying to achieve. But for many people, they also want that individual connection. And because that's one of the things I always emphasize with elephants, is that not only they're critically endangered species and beautiful, and saving them is about a part of saving the planet, they're also individual persons, self-aware persons such as we are. And as individuals, they're worth every care and support and than any other person.
Right. And I think sometimes that translation gets lost in this world, that we don't always see other species like us. It's hard for us to maybe comprehend that there is other beings out there that are very intelligent, they're sentient, they have families, they grieve, they can share, they can express themselves with each other. And that sentiment is lost. I think people can't connect. So I like that they can connect with these elephants on an individual basis.
Yeah, and it's really part of the I guess the human evolution, which is necessary for our survival. I mean, we have a tribal mind, so we have 120 people we connect with, and maybe a larger community out of that we have a loose connection with. Outside, then go to hell. You're not one of us. So
Right.
even humans don't connect well with other humans. If you're a different race or country or nationality or some other arbitrary division, and suddenly what happens to them suddenly doesn't matter. But it always ends coming back to us. And the treatment of animals, both in the wild animals and domestic animals in agriculture, are primary drivers to destruction of the planet. And so unless we can expand our love and compassion outside even the confines of our species, we will not survive. That's the great moral challenge of our time, to expand our compassion and concern outside of the borders, of our countries, nationalities, and race, but even further than that, outside the borders of our own species, if we're going to successfully survive, because we're realizing more and more is that we're all interconnected. We're all on the same little lifeboat of a planet, isolated, billions of miles from anywhere else, and we have no way of getting anywhere. Sure, Elon Musk, billionaire, thinks he can escape to Mars, but you can't breathe the atmosphere, and pretty much everyone will die over their lifetime by cancer through the extreme radiation in the area. Mm-hmm. So it's like a fool's paradise,
Right.
That's not, and it may be a fantasy for billionaires, but it's no viable solution for humanity and our planet.
I agree that, and I think that idea, that notion of interconnection, is becoming to slowly trickle in and be understood. I know from my own mission, that's what I like to share with people, is that we are all interconnected, and we really do rely on each other. I think we just don't, it's hard to realize that because we're all in our own little blocks.
Yeah, exactly. And there's a wonderful parallel to that. As we expand our love and connectedness with a larger group of living beings, we actually become healthier and happier and more content and peaceful.
I agree.
So there's a win-win solution at every level, because I always wail against these things about wildlife versus environment, or wildlife versus people, environment versus the economy. These are all these false paradigms. It's looking after the planet, other living creatures, is always a win-win solution, and for not only us as a species, but us as individuals. The selfless love and work for others and expanding that to the maximum of our capacity that's available is a great benefit to us as individuals.
Right, exactly. Just for myself, I've been wanting to see some kind of progress made where we're not even hunting endangered species. And the bottom line is that if we're hurting them, we're actually hurting the environment, which then hurts us. But then, as you're pointing out, like expansion of that love, you expand yourself when you can be open to another being, not just to someone who's similar to you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It makes us happier. It's a wonderful thing. And so it's a beautiful future.
It can be.
If we can allow it to happen.
Right. Yeah. That's the key word. Allow for that. Speaking of bonds, I did read about two elephants that came together from two different herds. I think it was Mayma, and I cannot pronounce is he a young bull?
Wow.
Yeah.
That was my best attempt at it. My Thai Laos is obviously, not going to be
good. But I love how they came together, and I feel that, their story of these two unrelated elephants forming, a herd, and Mayma is still very much, very protective of her herd. That so much can be learned as humans. We can learn so much from how they came together and formed a family.
Yeah, and people often, they get surprised. Oh, this unrelated elephant adopted this young male and looking after him just like her own calf. Because from a strict biological survival sense, there's no merit in that. You should just kill the calf and get it out of the way to breed your own. And we see the same, surprise when people, are watching orangutans and how they act. Because the reality is, these are no longer animals in that kind of definition. They're persons, and just as a human female will adopt a totally unrelated offspring, out of compassion and love, altruism and look after that offspring have their own. Because biologically that doesn't make sense, but she's a person, and she cares, and she's far more than just her biological nature. She's transcended her biology to be something far more, unique and beautiful. And elephants also have that capacity, So this is why people can get surprised, but for me it's no surprise, because they're not only persons, but sometimes they can actually be wonderful persons that transcends being just simply an animal trying to have its genes survive.
Right. I think that is altruistic, and I like that you're using the word persons to imply elephants and people and just collectively, because to me as well, I see that we're all beings, and we're all here sharing the same earth and going through the same struggles. So thank you for using that. I really do appreciate that. What successes has the International Elephant Project seen since its start?
I mean, we're certainly being able to, start securing live tracts of lowland rainforests. That's a good start and ongoing success. We hope to continue over the next decade to secure ecosystems the right type, shape, and size to take these individual herds through the extinction crisis. And also, we've been very successful working with the local communities to prevent human-elephant conflict, and so both elephants and people are safe. And we've had a great success with, we have a wonderful wildlife ambulance that we fund, and great vets and brave technicians that can actually, when these males come out and start roaming and causing trouble, is to get them onto a truck and drive them to the next ecosystem. I cheekily call this our cross between Uber and Tinder for the male elephants, and that's been very successful. I mean, in the past, people have tried to translocate male elephants and they basically walk over 100 kilometers to get back to where they started.
Wow.
But these elephants are actually, for the first time ever, are staying where they are. Because the reason being is we're not just willingly transferring to some odd bit of forest. We're transferring to places they probably would choose to go if they were allowed to before their rainforest was destroyed.
Wow. That's amazing work. And I also read that you're doing a project to plant indigenous trees in Gunung Leuser National Park, which is a very special place.
Well, the Gunung Leuser National Park doesn't hold terribly much interest for me. I mean, I know you have, Barack Obama doing a big thing about Gunung Leuser National Park or something, but it's actually, from a biologist point of view, not very interesting because because it's all in the big mountains and there's very little biodiversity up there relatively compared to the rest. And all the megafauna, tigers, orangutans, and elephants can't live there. They only can live in the lowland secondary, already logged forest outside the rainforest. And so it's always counted as this conservation thing. But from if we want to save the agricultural systems for humans, so the humans population can survive, they want the elephants, tigers, and orangutans to survive, it's of very little interest to us. So what we're doing is we're working with our partners to save the key remaining forests and develop these megafauna sanctuaries in the lowland forests to the northeast and the southwest, and in this case also for the remaining Sumatran rhinos to survive. And what and a lot of that is, as I said, it's a lot of secondary forests that you can probably just leave and grow back over the next 50 or so years, and that's fine. Some of it, unfortunately, it probably needs a little bit of a helping hand. And so we work with the local communities for reforestation projects to restore the forest, but also in conjunction with that, developing the sympathetic agricultural systems with the local communities so they can prosper, such as shade coffee and jungle rubber, vanilla, sea-lang honey production, as just a few examples. So there can always be a win-win situation for everybody.
Yeah, that sounds wonderful and sustainable.
Yes, exactly. And of course, what I would say, look, short-term economics and the environment are at odds. Long-term economics and the environment are the one business model. And so if we're concerned about future generations and survival of the planet, we're actually making the most sound economic decisions for the people as well as the planet.
Yeah. Amazing work that you're doing there. And I have the utmost respect for you and for International Elephant Project and for the Orangutan Project and for all of the wisdom that you shared with me today and with listeners. I really appreciate that, Leif.
Well, thank you. But my most important asset of what I hold as an individual is ability to collectivize. And so our strength is not by myself having great knowledge or great ability, but I have collectivized with so many wonderful people, who on the ground run these projects, helping develop the plans and strategies, and so it's a whole team effort. And so and I had the privilege often in podcasts like this representing that wonderful dedicated team, and communicating the wonderful successes and challenges that they're facing over the next decade.
Thank you for mentioning that. Yes, it's true. The community at hand is also a very big part of this. So thank you for mentioning that. Where can listeners go so they can help support the Sumatran elephant and learn more about this work?
Fantastic. They can go to elephant.org.au and connect us by social media, sign up for a newsletter. As we talked about, adopt one of these 4 elephants and become a donor. and for the first time was doing doing the first eco tour to Laos actually in July, to
Really?
see these elephants which have been reintroduced to the wild. And people often say you can't reintroduce them back in the wild, and the Elephant Conservation Centre in Laos is doing it, and as we speak, and it's successful. And we're going to go out and see those elephants with field project manager Alex Mokumbecker, which is one of the leading experts in elephants in the world. And so if anybody in July wants to have a fantastic eco tour into Laos and Thailand to see this work, yeah, you're quite happy to join us.
Oh, wow. That would be so amazing to see, because I know one of the elephants was aboard a plane that was, I think, was it being transferred to a zoo, and it ended up getting to Laos's Elephant Conservation Center, correct?
Exactly. They were literally being loaded up on planes to go off to be sold as circus animals, to live their life in torture and misery and abuse and domination, and saved, and then went to the Elephant Conservation Center in Laos, and then, miracle of miracles, to be part of the first Asian elephant reintroduction program, so they can live in wild and dignity in their own society. So,
wow,
that's one set of lucky elephants, that won the jackpot, I guess,
yeah.
to escape such a life.
Oh my gosh, I just got the chills thinking about their life. What could have been, but what it is now.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
One day I
And
would
so
love to come.
yeah, I mean that's one, and then it's one of the things is with conservation. I mean, there's so much wrong with the world and so much to fight against, but within it, we just highlighted one example of of the stories which are heartfelt, where we can actually make not only meaningful changes for future generations, we can make immense and meaningful changes for individuals, as part of the holistic strategy for survival of the species.
Right. For all persons.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you so much, Leif, for your time. This has been amazing.
You're most welcome, Nicole. It's been fantastic. Thank you very much. And thank you to all your listeners.
Thank you.